We're still going. We're almost there. Gosh, this is one heck of a tower. It's honestly not that different from the tower we climbed at the beginning of the game. Let's get in.
Are you okay? Look, I know you've been through a lot, but you have to help me access the Zenith network. I need to see their files, anything referring to the word Nemesis. Okay. Over there. The systems are down all over the base. I should be able to take advantage of... Yes, Nemesis. Here. There's something in deep space. It's following the Zeniths to Earth. Look. Escape vectors. Alva tried to warn me about this. The Zeniths aren't planning to stay here. It's a machine of some kind. Or a swarm of them. The energy readings are astronomical. Aloy, I don't think a natural disaster destroyed the Zenith colony on Sirius. This thing did. Earth isn't a new home for them. It's a way station. They're on the run.
I see you've been busy.
And you've been lying. Nemesis, what is it?
It is us. The minds of Far Zenith. Or failed copies of them, anyway. Back on Sirius, some of my peers weren't satisfied with physical immortality. They wanted digital transcendence. A way to upload their minds into any form, organic or mechanical. Nemesis was a failed experiment to that effect. Abandoned, but never erased. An immense database of our memories, emotions, and prejudices left to fester.
And it destroyed your colony?
We didn't realize it had gained sentience until it broke containment. It had everything it needed from our memories. Security protocols, system specs, override codes. It hacked everything before we knew what hit us. Then it took over our printing facilities, allowing it to gain any machine form it needed to wipe us out.
But why?
Imagine being trapped alone for decades with only the twisted echoes of megalomaniacs for company. It hates us for abandoning it to that prison. And now that it's free, it will do anything to destroy us, including denying us a safe harbor on Earth.
The extinction signal that woke Hades. You didn't send it. Nemesis did.
Finally, you understand. And when that failed, it launched from Sirius to finish the job itself. Which is why we must flee to a random planet circling a random star, somewhere it can never find us.
With Gaia, so you can build yourself a new world.
That's the plan. Even now. Earth is finished, Aloy. Nemesis will scour it of life to deny its creators a viable home. But Elizabeth's dream won't die. You'll come with me to the stars. And with Gaia, we'll create a new world. Together, where that monstrosity could never find us.
What? No.
I loved Elizabeth. More than you could ever know. And I let her stay behind to die with the rest of humanity. A mistake I have regretted for 1,000 years. Now she stands before me again. Not some inferior copy, but her best possible self. So I'm not asking. You're coming with me. It may seem harsh now, but you'll forgive me in a few centuries.
You can't force me, Tilda. Your shield is gone.
I have something better. Spectre Prime, to me.
Take cover! Get to the door!
Submit, Aloy. You can't win.
No! I've heard that before.
What the f***ing hell?
Designed to survive against more than that.
Okay, here we go. Well, let's start doing some damage here. Oh, this is gonna be fun, isn't it? Okay, well, I'm gonna try to be as efficient as I can here. Let me try to avoid. Okay, I gotta get its attack patterns down. I'm not used to it yet. First of all, let me switch on over to this thing. Let's try to get some of that armor off. Ooh, that probably didn't feel too good. Okay, well, now that you've been hit by that, let me see if I can't barrage you with some of those. And, okay, that was not the damage. I thought it was going to actually explode a lot more than it did. Come on. Come on, there we go. There's another one. I think I got you with it. Almost. There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go. Come on. There's the plasma overload I wanted. Okay, that's pretty good. Pretty good, pretty good, pretty good. Let's see if we can't get more. Tilda, you need to honestly... I am not good with the frickin' timing on this at all. With the dodges. Hold on a moment. Okay, that was a little bit better. Oh, there was a second one. I wasn't expecting the follow-up. Okay, hold on. Can I... if I could frickin' hit... That's an early jump. Okay. Move, 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 move. Actually, you know what I could do for you? Are you... What is that? What is that attack? What is that attack? Okay, no you don't. How about this instead? I think I barely got it before it got away. It didn't do a ton of damage, though. Yes, it is. Oh, I hit it. That was a heck of a shot. Okay, hold on, hold on, hold on. I need to hit you with... What is this attack? I don't like it. Oh, that's a laser beam. That is a laser beam. Woo! Okay. Didn't think it was going to create a fireball. I thought it was just going to be a beam, you know. Goodness me. Hold on. Here, have another one of those. And now, if you could just... Brace shot. Okay, I timed that properly. Concentration really helped me out there. Hold on, hold on, hold on. We've almost got the build up. I probably should be using corrosive damage to get everything else off. There we go. There's some damage. All right. What corrosive damage is the rest, right? Let's try using this thing.
A few more hits.
Oh, come on. I can land it. I can land it. I know. We're so freaking close. If we can get like that corrosive damage up, we can knock off the rest of that plating. Okay, Tilda, you need to calm down. You really do. This is not going to work out for you, especially because this is going to probably end it. Nope, never mind. But almost did. This will end it, though.
Armor's up. It's over. Lord, just let me choose.
So I'm guessing she's just dead? Wow.
She tried to take you. And she told you about Nemesis.
So you've known all along.
From Hades, yes. Along with data on how to circumvent the Zenith shields. Everything I did to create the rebel army was based on that knowledge. To reach this place, this moment.
And you couldn't just tell me?
Come now, Aloy. You're the last person to act sensibly in the face of impossible odds. When I learned of Nemesis from Hades, I saw the pieces on the board and how to play them. And in that same moment, I knew it was a game you would never play. That you would interfere and attempt to save the Tenakth. I was correct, to a point. You ruined my plans, but brought your own to fruition. The end result is the same. We're here. And now it's time for me to leave this doomed planet behind. To seize the Odyssey and the Apollo database and begin a new chapter in my pursuit of knowledge, one with infinite possibilities. You can join me if you so desire. You've more than earned your place. Unlike Tilda, I'm extending a polite invitation.
You're going to just take off? And abandon everything? Stay. Help me fight that thing.
Perhaps Tilda didn't adequately define the threat. Nemesis can't be stopped. It destroyed a highly advanced Zenith colony in a matter of hours. What hope does this primitive tribal Earth have? If you brought Gaia, you wouldn't be abandoning life, you'd be saving a seed for a new world. Just as Elizabeth did. It's the choice she made. The sacrifice of all that is for the hope of what might be. If she were here in your place, she would board that shuttle, Aloy.
Found her.
Is she hurt?
Still on her feet.
Thank the Ten.
Goodbye, Silence.
She looks okay.
She looks victorious.
As always.
Aloy. You did it.
Hey, where's he going?
As far away as anyone can go.
Oh. Are you sure?
You're staying.
For a time. You people are going to need all of the help you can get.
Does anyone else need a drink?
Not if it's that ale of yours.
I'd be fine with a nap.
Excellent idea.
I hope it's really over this time.
There's another battle ahead, Elizabeth. Very different than the one you fought. It's not about the distant hope of creating a new world. It's about preserving the one we have. My friends have a new mission. To spread the word and ask for help. They've taken it in stride. I think it's because they've always known what I've only just started to understand. that the people of this world have the strength to fight any battle. The ingenuity to solve any problem. Courage to overcome any obstacle. And the resilience to rise after any setback. As for me, I can't say I'm not afraid. What lies ahead will be harder than anything we've faced before. But I know I can put the fear aside. Because for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm not alone.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of Horizon Forbidden West. The not just second game in the series any longer, but the middle game in what is now confirmed to be a Horizon trilogy, not just by the events of the story itself, but by Guerrilla Games and Sony, who have greenlit a third game and hopefully will follow through with it all the way, given that Sony is now pivoting towards live services rather than single-player releases, but I digress. That's a conversation for another day. We know Guerrilla Games has every intention of making a third game now, and I cannot wait for it. This game was, in fact, a commercial and critical success. This was confirmed, even despite the fact that, once again, Horizon decided to release really close to the biggest open-world hit of the year. The first time it was Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which this game released only a week before that came out. And this time around, they at least managed to give it a 2-week gap because, 2 weeks after the release of Forbidden West, we got Elden Ring. My goodness, Guerrilla Games, can you please give these games a fighting chance and release it at a completely different time of year? Like, stop releasing in spring, please. It's not working. Try November or something. I know you guys can compete against Assassin's Creed. That's easy. Just try not to compete against Elden Ring from Software or Nintendo again. It's just, I'm not saying that your games are worse, but I am saying that it's probably just not a good idea ever to do that. Anyways, holy crap, what an ending, right? What a story this was. And honestly, was there ever really a chance that Horizon Forbidden West was going to have a story that matched up to Horizon Zero Dawn? I'm not about to immediately come out here and say that I thought this story was bad, but no, there was no way this was going to be as strong as Zero Dawn's. I've talked about Zero Dawn's story many times and how I thought it was one of, if not the best, open world story that I have ever experienced in an open world game. And that is because they are very hard to do. Even Zero Dawn started off pretty darn weak. It was initially a very just kind of whatever story set in this interesting world, and honestly the reason I was so hooked on Zero Dawn from the get-go is because I tend to prefer world building to actual storytelling. I love games that have a good sense of scope and scale to their worlds and are able to get you engrossed and immersed in the world itself before trying to tell you an interesting story, and that's exactly what Zero Dawn does, because especially in the second half of the game, the story really picks up and becomes extremely compelling, but not in those big and bombastic moments, but more of those personal and intimate moments. My absolute favorite quest in all of Horizon Zero Dawn is towards the end of the game. It's not the very final quest, but it's one of the last quests in the game. It's the moment where Aloy discovers what happened to all of the members of Zero Dawn. She discovers the Great Betrayal, and she also meets Sylens face-to-face for the first time in the entire game, when up to that point, they had only ever talked either via hologram or just over voice via their focuses. That whole quest is phenomenal due to how personal and intimate it is. Those are my favorite moments in this series, is where Aloy is discovering things, and especially when Sylens is involved, because he is such a fantastic and compelling character. And him just, those two just debating back and forth over these things and talking about what they've discovered, and just even though Aloy has that biting attitude with Sylens, there's still an interesting relationship there between the two of them, because they are the only people who fully understand and fully grasp what happened in this world and what's going on in any of this stuff. And I really appreciate those moments. Those were what made Horizon Zero Dawn for me. Forbidden West has a distinct lack of these moments, even though its story is so much broader than anything Zero Dawn was trying to do. There are some moments like this, particularly with Alva, who I found to be the most compelling new side character that we got in this game. You just don't really get that a lot with a lot of the other characters. And clearly the point of her Forbidden West story as a whole was for Aloy to learn that she no longer needs to tackle everything entirely by herself. She needs to trust in her friends, trust in her companions, and realize that there are other people out there who can help her. I mean, you get that from the very moment that Varl rescues her early on in the game, when she has her run-in with the Zeniths, and this only builds upon itself more and more, and she fully comes to that conclusion when Varl makes that sacrifice, and she learns, okay, I need these people to help me, and that's of course demonstrated with the Singularity quest line, where everybody comes together to help Aloy in achieving this goal, before we obviously get the twist at the end, which we will talk about in a minute. But in telling that story, I feel like we did not get nearly enough interesting moments between characters, or at least not nearly as many not nearly as high enough a ratio of those moments, because like I said, I like these characters in a bubble. I like Kotallo in a bubble. I like Zoe in a bubble. I like Erend in a bubble. But when we actually are given the time to put Aloy in a scenario with these characters, I feel like there is just a distinct lack of care given to these characters in their writing. Their personalities are interesting. I love Erend. The delivery of that character from that voice actor is phenomenal. But for some reason, he just feels completely wasted in this game. And, I mean, in the first game, you got a bit from him, but it all sort of just ended abruptly. And in this game, he is the exact same character at the beginning of this game as he is at the end of the game. Kotallo, while, yes, he does evolve in a certain way, still feels like the same character from beginning to end. Zoe, the same way. She learns some things, she develops and evolves as a character, but it doesn't really feel like there's enough there. And that's probably my biggest frustration with this game. Even Alva, because, I mean, and Alva is especially disadvantaged by the fact that she is one of the last characters you encounter in the game. She, while is at a same level of fundamental understanding as Aloy, again, just doesn't get enough to develop. We get those tidbits, we get those snippets, and I have to say, all of those videos, which, you know, there was about a half dozen of them, where I just took the time to sit down and converse with my companions, I sort of did out of necessity, and I tried to isolate those videos as much as I could, because I understand that it's a catch-22. Those videos were necessary for the world building and for the backstory, and so we could get a deeper understanding of these characters. On the other hand, they were also the most boring episodes in the entire series, and a lot of times I just did not give a crap. Really, the only character where I sat down and I conversed with him and had a full conversation with, where I found it interesting, was, of course, Sylens, because he is, I think, the best character in this entire series. He is phenomenal, and Lance Reddick is a big part of that. Now, let's talk about that for a second before I jump back into talking about the story. Yes, we all know now that, unfortunately, Lance Reddick did pass away. Back on March 17th of this year, 2023, Lance Reddick unexpectedly died of heart failure, and that was not known at the time. It was just sort of this freak, out-of-nowhere, crazy tragedy that nobody could have possibly expected. I mean, it was literally right while they were in the middle of the screening and the release period of John Wick 4, which he is obviously in. Nobody expected this, and it just completely came out of nowhere, blindsided everybody. That obviously affects this game. It affects his work in Destiny, which is another ongoing game that I cover here on the channel that he's a part of. And, you know, he's obviously known for so many amazing roles, such as The Wire. Phenomenal talent, that man, and we lost him too soon, and that is going to have an effect on this series, because it was clearly showcased here in the end. He was going to be a big part of the third game, and in fact, he is a part of the Burning Shores expansion, although he had already recorded all of his dialogue for that before he had passed, as Burning Shores only released in April, about a month after his passing, so that was already taken care of. But it really changes how this story is going to happen going forward. I mean, who knows what they're going to do? Are they going to recast him, which, given how integral he is to the story, that almost feels like a necessity, but how are they going to do so in a respectful manner? And no matter how Guerrilla goes about this, it's going to be awkward in some way. I would hope that they keep him in some way. Again, I don't know how much they can do or what they already have recorded from him, but I would hope they can keep him in some way because that's going to service the story better. But again, I hope they can do so in a respectful way, because just cutting him out of the story is going to... I mean, that is going to be the somehow Palpatine returned of this story if that happens. It's just not going to feel natural at all. It's going to feel totally ham-fisted almost no matter what they do, because of how integral he is to the plot line. And it's unfortunate, and it's completely beyond anybody's control, but it is something to take into consideration as we go into the future. But going back to what I was saying about the characters, I don't feel like any of them... It's not the voice actor's fault. It's the writing. I don't feel like any of it is compelling enough to carry this story. And the biggest culprit of that was with Tilda, who I thought was an interesting character until she kept talking, and we had so much for that last dialogue scene I had with her in the 2 episodes ago was excruciating. It really was. And like I said, at Catch-22, I felt like I had to put that in there because it was necessary to inform the player and to inform people who are invested in the story. But by the end of that, man, I just didn't care. And then to have that turn, it almost felt like they jumped the shark with the ending here. And I wasn't a huge fan of it. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of it. There were things about it that was satisfying. I loved the moment where all of the machines came in to take out all of the Spectres. That was great. I loved that final fight with Eric and how satisfying it was to finally take him down. I honestly actually liked their decision to make Gerard just die this really pathetic death, because I mean, that's what he was. He was a big Weasley character who only had confidence due to all of the technology around him. And the second it all blew up in his face, he died a pathetic death because that's what he was. But the turn with Tilda, while yes, I think that there was a payoff to it, it just felt a little bit weird in the way they did it, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. The long and the short of it is, I don't think this story is as strong as Zero Dawn, and not that it ever was going to be, but I also feel like they could have done a little bit better with it. I do think that cutting Sylens out of so much of this story was, while necessary for the themes, to the themes that they were trying to go for, I do feel like that did this story a major disservice. And I don't know. I think we needed more of those, because honestly, this game had so much more of Aloy just being completely by herself than we ever had in Zero Dawn. For a game that was so much more about Aloy being isolated, being an outcast, that's what the whole message of that first game was. It still felt like she had more relationships, more going on with the character she was around, because there was so much less downtime in Zero Dawn, because that game had so much more going for it. And that comes to my other complaint with Forbidden West, and perhaps my biggest complaint, and that is how content-rich this game is, although rich might not be the right word, because this game is bloated. It is incredibly bloated, and that is a feeling that never went away, no matter how long I played this game. I have said many times in the past that I don't tend to like open-world games because they feel the need to just have stuff. Just stuff for the player to do. They just need to fill the map with markers and things. And yes, Zero Dawn absolutely does do that. But what made Horizon Zero Dawn so special was how it eschewed a lot of those conventions and made so many of them noteworthy. The Tallnecks were an amazing take on the radio tower stuff that we see in Ubisoft games. And even in this game, I feel like they still did the Tallnecks very, very well. But then you have things like the Cauldrons, which in that game were, they were a combat challenge. They were a very standard challenge with some nice puzzle solving, but Forbidden West there were a couple that were really cool, but there were others that just went way too far. I'm sorry. That last one with the Tide Ripper at the very end was just obnoxious. The water temple of Cauldrons, if ever there was one. And again, there were map markers in Zero Dawn, but a lot of those were just like collectibles. Like they were things you can grab. You didn't necessarily need them. Going after all of the metal flowers and the vantage points in that game were not 100% necessary. They were just kind of there. But there were so many things to do along the way, so many fights to get yourself in, so many resources to collect, but like not grind for, if that makes sense. And usually a lot of the side quests naturally led you in those directions. And I think that's the other issue I have, is that Forbidden West had a lot of side quests and a lot of errands, which I think is fine. I like that they have so many of these to distract the player and give the player little stories to interact with as you go throughout the game. I don't have a problem with that necessarily. What I do have a problem with is the fact that Forbidden West's errands and side quests didn't seem to naturally flow with the environment very well, if that makes sense. It felt like a lot of Horizon Forbidden West's map in general was set up to house these side quests and errands, as opposed to just give the environment something to do, which I feel like is more what Zero Dawn did. It naturally led you to new places when you participated in these side quests, and it just kind of felt like it informed the locations a little bit better, while Forbidden West did the opposite. It created locations specifically for the side quests, and then once the side quests were done, there was nothing else to do there. And I don't like that world design very much. I mean, it's a subtle thing, but it is something that is extremely noticeable when you're playing through it, because there was so much that I would end up stumbling upon in Forbidden West, and then I would realize, oh, I can't actually do anything here just yet. In Zero Dawn, I think that happened once, like in the whole game, and it was a really, like, I really had to go out of my way to run into that scenario, and you just kind of didn't have that, and that just wasn't really a problem in that game. But it was a big problem here where it happened multiple times, and I feel like that is lazier world design. And again, just there's so much wasted space on the Forbidden West map, especially in the last third of the game. I mean, all of that space at the end where you're like, man, this just goes on forever. And then you realize that a giant chunk of it is just impassable water that you either have to cutscene over or fly over to get to Legacy's Landfall. And I don't know, I was not the biggest fan of how they did that. And don't get me wrong, I love the look of this game. You will never hear me say that Forbidden West is not a beautiful game. This game is gorgeous. The art direction is phenomenal. Taken up to 11, even more pretty than what they did in Zero Dawn, because let's face it, Zero Dawn is mostly set in like two biomes, a desert biome and a forest biome, while Forbidden West goes all over the place with its biomes, from what you're dealing with in Chainscrape, which is more deserty, very similar to Zero Dawn's environments, but then you're immediately, you go out into these Badlands, which then turn into where Plainsong is, where it's this beautiful, overgrown, very flowery environment that then turns into mountains, and then you have jungles, and then you eventually get to the beach where things start to change a little bit, and then you get Legacy's Landfall, which is its entire own thing. And I like the diversity here, but again, there's just too much. There's too much in this game. It's too long. And I love it. I really do. But it will always be a problem that I will have with open world games that just try to do too much. And it's what concerns me for the next game, and that they might try to do even more. I worry about Guerrilla Games and how they're going to handle that. I worry about how that's going to affect the game's quality itself. And that's going to be a little bit too much. And I mean, there are things about these games that I don't have a problem with that I know a lot of other people do. Like, one of them is the procedurally generated facial animations that you get with a lot of the dialogue in this game, because it's such a big game, it needs to have those. I personally don't have a big problem with it. There are certain moments where, yes, I do feel like it is a little awkward and still. A great example of that was a couple of episodes ago when Erend and Aloy were having that conversation, and there was that whole, let's have a drink and have a chat over this. There were like those 10-15 second breaks where they were just kind of smiling and looking at each other awkwardly, and the animations were stilted before they ended up sitting down and then having that drink and then talking. And it was like, what is going on here? You guys, you have to realize what you're doing and fill it with something. You got to have a little bit more dialogue. You can't just let that hang for so long. Then it does look weird. A lot of that is, made up for by the fact that we've got these characters just talking, and these animations are just vectors through which the dialogue is delivered. And I feel like sometimes Guerrilla forgets that you need to keep that dialogue going, otherwise things get a little bit strange and you're just left staring at these awkward animations. And I feel like that's where it's at its worst, but otherwise I don't have a big problem with it. When they're just kind of doing the standard hand motions and talking to each other, whatever. That's fine. I feel like it gets the job done. I'm more there for the voice performances themselves because, in my opinion, at that point, that's when the game just becomes an RPG. And if you're about to tell me that RPGs don't also have the exact same problem, then you're full of crap because they all freaking do. Whenever you got to have that canned, non-cutscene dialogue between two characters, it's always going to be weird. And when the actual cutscenes come into play in this game, they were almost always fine. Yeah, I think the only issue I ever had with the cutscenes is that sometimes the sound effects were a little bit weird, and it was mostly down to the mixing. You'd get moments where, like, the explosions were quieter than the character's shouts, for instance, and that was a little bit weird, but those were few and far between, I felt like. For the most part, the cutscenes delivered pretty darn well and were some of the highlights of the dialogue in this game, and a little bit of the storytelling was nice in those moments as well, so I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, there are still things I love about this game that I think it did better. And actually, we probably should talk about the combat before we get anywhere else. Now, I will say, I loved a lot of the new machines that were introduced in this game, but not all of them. There were some that were extremely annoying. I do think that the prevalence of scavengers over scrappers was not a big fan of that. I didn't really like the scavengers all that much. There were some of the bigger machines that annoyed the ever-living crap out of me. I love the Tide Ripper. I love the Slitherfang. I love the Tremor Tusk. And oh man, I love the Slaughter Spine. What a cool machine. Probably my favorite in the entire series. However, I really didn't like things like the Rollerbacks and the Shell Snappers. And the Rollerbacks weren't too bad, but I really didn't like the Shell Snappers. And the Dreadwings too. Oh man, those things got on my nerves. Wide Maws, another one I just couldn't stand because a lot of this comes down to not necessarily the design of the machine itself, but the mechanics within. My biggest gripe with the combat system in this game is that it tried to do a little bit too much with the elements and get a bit too cutesy. Now, the big three, obviously, are plasma, water, and acid. Now, acid, I'm sorry, whenever that was a necessary weakness inherent in a machine's design, I hated it. I absolutely hate it because the idea with acid is that it's obviously supposed to break off all of the armor parts so you can deal damage to the smushy interior with kinetic damage. But the problem is that this is extremely unrewarding because the amount of damage you do inside the machine doesn't change. Like, as long as you can hit those unarmored spots without removing a single armored piece, no problem. That doesn't really help you. And in fact, all you have to do with every machine is just go for the face most of the time, and it's the exact same effect. So acid felt super unrewarding all of the time. Plasma was really rewarding on big machines, really big, powerful Apex machines, because getting that plasma buildup was very easy to do because you would have to cause those explosions multiple times just to down a single machine. However, water was probably the most annoying and felt like the most useless because all it ever existed to do was to allow you to build up shock damage on what was otherwise a machine that resisted shock damage, but that just made the water element feel like a middleman that had absolutely no place, and it just got a little bit too cutesy with these. And then like I said, plasma damage. It was fine on the big machines, but if you used it on the smaller machines, there was absolutely no point in having it because you would usually just outright kill the machine before you ever even had a chance to get the explosion off. And I don't know, I felt like they just tried to do a bit too much in that regard. And like I said, some of those machines, like the Rollerbacks, were weak to acid, and the Wide Maws were weak to water, and the Dreadwing was that one also weak to acid, or was that one plasma? I don't know, but those machines just felt like they relied a bit too much on an element that was just unsatisfying to use. And I found it so much more interesting to incorporate things like even shock. I've never been a huge fan of, but when you incorporate like frost damage or fire damage into things, where the fire damage, it can incapacitate an enemy for just long enough for you to get into position to take out a weak point, or frost damage to get that extra damage on something, or even using things like a rope caster just to down machine just long enough to power up a super charged attack, which in that regard, that was probably my favorite addition to the combat system, were those power moves, something like a braced shot, which I used very frequently in this series. But a lot of the other power moves that I did not show on other weapon types are also very, very fun and very rewarding to use, and I liked those elements. I also liked the overcharges with Aloy, radial blast or power shots. These were really, really fun to incorporate into a build as well, and to use with some of your favorite weapons. I liked those elements. I just didn't like the elementals themselves, if that makes sense, the additions, because it just felt like they were trying to do too much when I enjoyed the type matchup, the rock, paper, scissors matchup of before, because that's the thing is there's some machines where it's like, oh, is this its weakness? Well, this is one I'm absolutely willing to fight. If I see something that's weak to frost damage, it's like, heck yeah, I'm going to go in there and just absolutely tear it to shreds. But then if I see, oh, its a weakness is water, I would rather just not even bother. It just feels like a gigantic waste of my time, and I'm not a big fan of it. I like the more in-depth interactions of machines. I like shooting off the weapon parts of machines and using those against it. Like, one of my favorites has obviously been Ravagers. I love that interaction with Ravagers, and Thunderjaws especially with the disc launchers. Love shooting off the weapons and then using it against it. It is such a cool interaction with these machines and is part of what makes the fight so enjoyable. But sometimes it just doesn't work. It really doesn't. And for all my love of the Tremor Tusks, their cannons were useless against the things, which was kind of an annoying inconvenience. And there was just times where you just felt like things should be so much more rewarding and so much more satisfying than they were. And I feel like Forbidden West didn't really take that into consideration. It felt like they just had the matchups for the sake of having them. And Clamberjaws. That was another machine type I couldn't stand. Golly, they were annoying too, because it felt like they didn't have weaknesses. Like they did, but it didn't matter. You were better off just hitting it with a couple brace shots. Because that's the thing too, is it just felt like abusing the stamina bar was so much more rewarding than trying to play into some of these type matchups because of how useless the reward was in doing so sometimes. And that was where my frustrations really came down to. Oh, and the melee combat. They overcorrected with the melee combat too much. I kind of understand where Guerrilla was coming from, because in Zero Dawn, the melee combat wasn't necessarily like super strong. Like, you couldn't use it to take down some of the bigger machines, but what it absolutely could do was make the weakest machines in the game extremely trivial, to the point where all Watchers and Scrappers and those really little machines, you could just power attack it once and stab it and it was dead. And in the early stages of the game, I mean, it wasn't outright a one-shot, but it was like a two-shot, which still made it extremely strong. Like, you could, very beginning of the game, you could run up, power attack a Watcher, stab it once, and then give it like one more heavy attack, and it was dead. And that was, I'm not kidding, immediately, before you had even made it through the introductory mission, you could do that. Or the introductory mission where Aloy actually has a spear. And they didn't want it to be that easy this time around. But again, like I said, they overcorrected to the point where melee combat was useless. The only time you would ever want to use your spear is if you had already knocked down an enemy with like an arrow and then you wanted to get a critical shot on it. And this made the melee pits extremely annoying, and I don't like the combo system that they added, because that just felt superfluous and way too unwieldy to use. The way that the combos interact with your button inputs at times just felt unresponsive, and I didn't like that very much. And I sound like I'm complaining a lot about this game, but so much of what I'm saying here is relative to what Horizon Zero Dawn did, which I need to remind you is in my top 10 favorite video games of all time. And the long and the short of it is that Forbidden West is not. I like this game. I really like this game. But it is not as strong as the first game because it tried to do too much. It wasn't as simplistic. It was already at a disadvantage due to the fact that Zero Dawn's story was really the only one that could be what it was, given the fact that it was building an entire world within the bounds of its story, while Forbidden West was, well, building off of that completed story and just didn't have as much wiggle room. But there are things that still could have been done better here, and there's things that I hope that they will do better in the third game, like again, some of the things with the combat, trying to do too much with the open world map, trying to have too many map markers. I'm sorry, but the Zeniths, man, I just did not care about them at all. They were such a boring idea to me that just didn't really have a place. Like, yeah, oh, it's this big interstellar threat, but they were such boring characters. Tilda was the most interesting one, and she was still like kind of whatever. And I say that as we still have to look at Burning Shores, which is going to be still diving into the Zenith's backstory a little bit more. And we'll talk about Burning Shores when we get to it. But Forbidden West was, to me, not as good as the first, but still a great game. Like, if I'm going to give the first game a 10 out of 10, which I will, I'm not saying that doesn't mean I think it's a perfect game, but to me it is 10 out of 10 level, given that it is around like 8th or 9th on my all-time list. I love the game to death. Forbidden West is more like an 8 out of 10 in that regard, because it still does so much right, and it still is a joy to play, but I'm also not clamoring to go back and replay it in the same one that I am the first game. I don't love it quite on the same level. And I do think that there were things that could have been improved upon in Zero Dawn that were improved upon, but I also think that Guerrilla's got a lot of lessons to learn from this game that I hope they will take into the third game, because otherwise things could get a little ugly here. But this Let's Play is not done just yet. We still have a number of things to go over before we can call this Let's Play done and finished. We have an entire expansion that was released back in April called The Burning Shores that we have left to look at. And we still have some stuff that I have left in the main game untouched. Some of those being Machine Strike and the Gauntlet runs and the arena and the melee pits. And I do believe that's it. But these are all the sort of just side activities that I left untouched because, I'm going to be honest, these are like the 4 most frustrating to go over. Now, I'm still on the fence with Machine Strike. I'm thinking there might be a better way of tackling this where I could just maybe upload it in one big extravaganza episode where I go over every single Machine Strike board in a totally skippable episode that if you want to watch it and we can just all kind of play together, that might be a thing, and I think it would be kind of fun, but I obviously don't want to go back to that until the very end. The Gauntlet runs, we haven't actually looked at those yet, and I am not even going to devote an entire episode to the Gauntlet runs because I'm going to be completely frank with you guys, I can't stand them. They are, I think, the worst gameplay moments in this entire game because it is a system that just doesn't work. And we'll explain it because I will do like the first couple of Gauntlet runs, but I'm not going to finish all of them. And the only reward for doing all of that is just a legendary piece of gear, which like I can get more of those from the arena, but more importantly, I can get a bunch of those just from playing the expansion, which we'll talk about that when we get into it as well. This is why I don't feel so super compelled to finish all these things, but also because it's going to get super monotonous. So I'm not going to look at all the Gauntlet runs, and the arena as well. I'm probably not going to be doing much more, if any, of that as well going into this, going into these next few videos. The one thing I do promise to finish, though, despite how much I know it's going to tick me off, is the melee pits, because we do need to see them to completion. We've only got a couple left to do, but I promise that we are going to do those before all is said and done. So Machine Strike is something I might save until like the very end of the Let's Play. We won't jump immediately back into that. We're going to look at the Gauntlet runs a little bit. We will look at the arena a little bit, and then we'll look at the melee pits, but all of that should probably only take a couple of episodes, and then we can finally move on to Burning Shores. I'm not going to make you guys wait too long, so that is really all I have to say. I had a lot of credits here to kill time, and I believe there's still another 8 minutes past even this point. So there's a lot of people worked on this game. I mean, these games are massive, massive, massive projects that take an entire city to make at this point because video games are becoming these gigantic, unwieldy beasts. But I wanted to give my thoughts here, even though I'm not doing so off the cuff like I normally do. I am recording this months after the fact, but I wanted to fill the time here when, in my initial take, I only filled about 12 minutes of time, and I felt like there was a whole lot more to say given how big this game is. But I won't take any more of your time. I'm just going to leave it at that. Guys, thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this video, this quote-unquote finale, I say with massive air quotes, of Horizon Forbidden West very, very much. And I will see you all in the next one.